And we are live. Welcome to the NBA Strategy Show. It is Monday, November 18th. I am Josh Engleman, here to break down two different slates. We've got, that feels a little bright. That'll be fine. We've got 8 games on FanDuel today. DraftKings dropped the 10:30 and the 10 o'clock start. So we've got a 6-gamer on DraftKings starting at 7, finishing up at 9 p.m. So good morning to everybody. I hope you had a great weekend. We got a lot to break down. Ownership is up, so I am exporting that right now and getting it locked and loaded into the sheet. Feeling good. A little tired, but we'll be fine. We'll make it. Friday night, Saturday night, late nights were really, really unhelpful. But what are you going to do? We had 2 really interesting combat sports to talk about. We had John Jones picking up the dub on Saturday. And that was fun. UFC was a good time, you know? I assume everybody enjoyed watching that card. But I've been waiting for this one more than any other one, because I've done this already. I talked about it Saturday during NBA Live Before Lock. I talked about it on Sunday for a brief moment on NFL Live Before Lock. But we kind of need to talk about it now. And it'll be brief. I promise. But hey, chat. Where are all the Mike Tyson people in chat? News God, I know you're here. We've already talked about this, so I'll let you go on this one. Where are all the Mike Tyson people at? Real quiet now, oddly. It's weird. It's almost like the 58-year-old man who, let's be clear here, did not treat his body like he was LeBron James for the previous 57 years. A lot of road miles on Iron Mike. A lot of road miles. And he looked worse than a 58-year-old man would look. All the clowns that watch training footage that's edited of him just hitting mitts for 5 seconds in a burst and then cutting to a different one where he did it, y'all got rooked. There was no chance that fight was going in any other way than the way that it did, unless the first thing that Mike threw was the one that landed. Insane. That shit was staged. No, it wasn't staged, guys. He was old and awful and couldn't move. He could barely move his feet. The dude almost tipped over just trying to move a little bit. Yes, Mitch Farrell nailed it. Jake was boxing a mannequin. Yeah. Bigger gloves. Power's going to be worse. Look, as weird as this is going to sound, like, I'm sure Jake Paul doesn't really want to knock out Mike Tyson. Like, it's got to be really weird to punch a 58-year-old man in the face. So, you know, hit him with a bunch of jabs across 8 rounds. Mike Tyson couldn't move. It happened like it was supposed to happen. Y'all are crazy. The fact that you ever thought it was going to be a thing. Could you imagine if Mike Tyson had the same energy from the weigh-in that he did in the fight? He was all jacked up, grabbing his junk, screaming, sliding around. The moment they showed his face when he was making his walk, it was just like, who is this dude? He looks exactly like a guy that knows he shouldn't be making this walk. All juice to the gills on the scale. And I don't mean like, obviously he's also juiced to the gills. Mike Tyson at 58. All the energy in the world at the weigh-ins, man, that one Somebody zap that bad boy right at him because he was a zero. A zero. News guy, how am I quiet as a church mouse? Look, man, generational wealth spot on Jake Paul on Friday night. Easy. Easy. All right, I got that out of my system. So, to all of you that thought Mike Tyson was just going to go in there and steamroll Jake Paul, let's keep those opinions to yourselves for a bit. Oh. It's just wild. It's just wild. And then Mike saying he's going to fight Logan. Mike, no one will ever put you in a ring again. All right, let's do this. We got 8 games to break down, plenty of time to get through it. Hit that like button if you haven't done it yet. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification hit the notification bell, and then follow me on Twitter at Josh Engleman. Chicago Bulls, 4.5-point dogs in Detroit. That's a wild line to think about right now. To 33.5 total. We got a couple games in the 230s. We've got this one. We've got Washington and the Knicks, Indy, Toronto, and then Atlanta and Sacramento. Yeah, he wasn't biting his gloves because he was holding back, Cat. That is not at all why he was doing that. You must have the same sort of affliction that Roy Jones Jr. has for not understanding something that has happened for decades. Decades. Mauro Ronaldo let everybody know over and over and over again, but I guess nobody wanted to take that information in on the broadcast either. All right, so for the Bulls, we're getting a little bit of love into Zach LaVine. He is 7K on DraftKings, shooting guard, small forward eligible. He's about 25% owned on DK, around 10 on FanDuel. And then that's kind of it for any sort of bulk ownership. 5% or less for everybody else on Chicago on the FanDuel side. And then like Kobe White, Vooch, Patrick Williams, Josh Giddey, all in that like 10-ish range. And that's exactly how I'm seeing this one. Ownership seems super in line right now for Chicago. Like I have Zach LaVine as the clear best option on DraftKings, but that's also shown in the ownership. So I think he looks properly owned. And then I have Kobe White, Vooch, Patrick Williams, and Josh Giddey, all basically right at 10% optimal, 10% ownership. So, like, as I look at the Bulls, they don't look like a team that needs a lot of discussion. Like, they're not doing anything really weird other than the fact that they're aware that Josh Giddey's bad on D. But the guys that should be getting around 10% ownership are. The guy that should be getting more ownership, Zach LaVine, is. And I think that's kind of all you're doing here. You know, like you can end up with a couple Ayo Dosunmu lineups. Certainly not a priority. Definitely the 6th best play on Chicago. But like it's these guys outside of LaVine, these guys are all sort of just last guy in. Do you guys see anything on Chicago that stands out more than just LaVine on DraftKings? A position really helps. When you're getting that shooting guard small forward on DraftKings, you just generally look a little bit better. Now, I really like the opposite side of this game, the Detroit side. We're seeing 20 to 30% ownership on Cade, Tobias Harris, and Jaden Ivey on DraftKings. They're all in the 10 to 20 range on FanDuel. And then Simone Fontecchio is getting a little bit of love on DraftKings, which I think is interesting. I'm guessing we end up squeezing out a little bit more value, and he looks less appealing now, but he's the flat 3K, small forward, power forward eligible. He's now back from missing. He missed like 2 or 3 games. Flat 3K playing around 20 minutes on a 6-gamer. That's we at least have to pay attention to it. So I understand why the ownership is coming in. Probably a hair high, but I think he's probably going to end up around 10% owned just because of that price. That price isn't correct. He should be around 4K if we're being honest here. But like, I find this Pistons team interesting for the things that aren't getting ownership. Because Cade, Tobias Harris, Jaden Ivey, big minutes. Cade's playing great. I've been getting a ton of him. He's 30% owned, and he should be. Tobias Harris certainly looks interesting, given the fact that he's playing 34 minutes a night. Jaden Ivey looks great, the second biggest usage guy on the team. But I'm kind of intrigued by 3% ownership to Malik Beasley and 3% ownership to Jalen Duren. We only have 6 games here. Like 6,100 center option for Jalen Duren against Chicago as a GPP pivot, a guy that you can get some positive leverage on. I think Duren stands out in GPPs, and I think Beasley does too. Now, 5,100. Also, let me give a caveat here. A lot of teams on back-to-backs today. We don't have the Bulls injury report, the Pistons, the Pacers, the Heat, the Wizards, the Knicks, the Rockets, the Suns, the Hawks. So we're missing a lot of information. Like if Tim Hardaway Jr. is back today for Detroit or something along those lines, then maybe Beasley doesn't look as interesting and the ownership makes more sense. But I have his optimal rate a lot higher than what we're seeing. I think Malik Beasley is getting slept on a little bit here, along with Duren in GPPs. They're not guys you should have a ton of, but they're guys that you can get to. It's the Cade, Harris, Ivy trio that you really want to pay most attention to. But the Pistons look awesome today, especially on DraftKings, because you're not getting to Fontecchio on FanDuel, so that removes him. Beasley and Duren are both also unowned on the Detroit side. But like Cade, Tobias Harris, Jaden Ivey on FanDuel, they all look like they should be owned around 15%, and they are. But I'm a big fan of Detroit, whether that's the guys you should obviously get to or the guys that look pretty cool in a GPP. Yeah, Jake, it is. Valentino, I have no idea yet. No idea. Terry Moses likes Vooch. Yeah, like just looking at it in this game, I'd rather have Jalen Duren than Vooch. Now, Duren's usage has been down a little bit more than what you'd expect. And the minutes could get weird for Duren too. They have Beef Stew right behind him. But I think I prefer Duren to Vooch in a GPP today. Okay. Next one up. The Philadelphia 76ers taking on the Miami Heat. This game has a 212 total, and yet still only the second lowest total on today's slate. Both of these teams are at the ass end of pace. Just to double check it. Wait, did they play 2 days ago too when I had this exact same conversation? That sounds familiar in my brain. Philly is 4th from the bottom in pace. Miami is 6th from the bottom in pace, at least per dunks and threes so far this season. So this is a very slow matchup, but we're getting some ownership in here. Now, we do know a little bit for injury here. Miami doesn't have the injury report. I did put Jimmy Butler in. Philly does have an injury report. Still no Maxey. Embiid questionable with an illness. So, okay. There's now obviously the Embiid status will completely change what we're talking about here. But assuming Embiid is in, I don't really think you're going to him with any sort of gusto. The priority is Jared McCain. 5,800 on DraftKings, point guard, shooting guard eligible, projected for 29% ownership, and he's 20% optimal to me. So I completely agree with the ownership. He looks great. He's 6,100 on FanDuel, 25% owned. I like him a little bit less on FanDuel, but he's still very clearly the best option from Philly. Paul George is getting 0 ownership on DraftKings at 8,300. Slightly different story on FanDuel, where he's $1,000 cheaper and 20% owned. That all makes sense to me. So it's really just paying attention to 2 dudes for Philly. It's Jared McCain on both sites and Paul George on FanDuel. And I completely McCain's my number 1 contender right now. I can pop that up on the screen quickly. But Jared McCain, number one dude on DraftKings for me, and not even particularly close. So, do with that what you will. But everybody's favorite TikTok dancer looking like a really solid play in this spot. Yeah, Embiid got the minutes. He's clearly not yet Embiid. Paul George is going to look back at his offseason and regret not going to the Oklahoma City Thunder again. That is the mistake that Paul George made. The mistake wasn't leaving the Clippers. The mistake was anyway. Caleb Martin sort of fits he's like a slightly lesser version of the Jalen Duren, Malik Beasley play. He's sort of like the 5,300. He's like the power forward Malik Beasley for me. Completely unowned, but plays enough minutes that like every once in a while, that's going to be fine. But definitely less optimal. But it's Jared McCain season, everybody. And that season is probably like, I don't know, early spring, fall. Doesn't strike me as a summer, winter guy. Now, the Miami side is very unappealing, particularly if Jimmy Butler is back. It also complicates their rotation. The minutes to Hawkes, Highsmith, Jovic, Robinson, Richardson are a giant question mark to me if Butler's back, and I assume that he is. But that's fine. I think we just ignore Miami, essentially. Bam Adebayo's 10% on both sites. He's 8,500 center only on both sites, and he's 10% owned. Like, that I'm fine with. Tyler Hero is $500 cheaper on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings. He's getting 10% ownership. That I'm fine with. Everybody else is essentially not owned. And given the pace of this game, the fact that Embiid could be in, which will certainly improve the Philly defense, I just don't want much here. I mean, only Bam Adebayo got to double digits in optimal on DraftKings. Hero and Rozier snuck over the line. They're both sitting at 10. But I don't see anything from Miami that you want to go nuts for. Jared McCain is a priority play today. No play on Miami is a priority play. Okay. Game 3. Washington Wizards. 13.5 point underdogs in New York. 230 total. For the Wiz, they're probably at full strength. They don't have an injury report. Neither do the Knicks. So that does make things a little bit harder here. We got Malcolm Brogdon back, finally. Brogdon played yesterday. Now, it's possible that Brogdon just doesn't play today. The only guy getting any love is Kyle Kuzma. 16% owned on DraftKings. 10% owned on FanDuel. The Miami GPP situation, or the Detroit Beasley situation. I'm a little surprised to see Kyle Kuzma getting 16% ownership. 6,800 power forward. It's fine. There's just nobody I want from Washington. All these guys just have stable prices. And hell, if Malcolm Brogdon's back, that's even worse. Because then you're adding another legitimate NBA player into a rotation and taking a bite out of everybody. So I just don't see how you want to get to Washington. They'd have to just be GPP pivots, and I think we'll have a lot better options than what I'm seeing. And then for the Knicks, I mean, it's a complete who the hell knows. I'm going to assume that Towns will be questionable on the back-to-back. We haven't had Miles McBride for the past 2 games. I projected him in, but I expect him to be questionable. This will be, I wouldn't even be surprised to see somebody else be questionable. So we're definitely going to need more information for the Knicks. But at the very least, we can talk about how great they look here against Washington, which, I mean, we're talking a 230 total. We're talking the Knicks. I would assume the Knicks have the highest implied total of any team on the slate. You're getting around 10% ownership on DraftKings to Bridges and Hart and Brunson, 15 to Anunoby, 30 to Towns. Now, they're all a bit less owned on FanDuel, which makes some sense. You got to remember there's 2 extra games. So only 6 on DraftKings, only 5 on FanDuel. But look at the optimal rates that I have for the Knicks. 18 for Bridges, 18 for Hart, 16 for Anunoby, 15 for Brunson, 18 for Towns. These guys should all be getting ownership. Bridges and Hart become the GPP options, not as owned, but guys you can save some ownership with. Anunoby and Brunson basically look properly owned. Don't mind getting to a little bit more Brunson. And then Towns should be 30% owned, given what he's doing offensively so far this season. Really good rebounding matchup for him as well. This is a great spot to get to. I know I tout the Knicks a lot, but these guys just play so many minutes that you immediately have these guys be different kind of plays than all the teams that play like 33, 34 with our starters. I love Bridges in a GPP. 6,600, the best positional eligibility you can get to at shooting guard, small forward. And he's playing 40 minutes a night. I mean, honestly, he's been playing more than that. 43 minutes a night over the last 3, 41 over his last 5, and he's averaging 40 on the dot in his last 10 games. This guy's just going to play 40 minutes. Yeah, Anthony. No, he would not last against Canelo and John Jones. No one thinks that he would. Canelo Alvarez would eviscerate him. John Jones would eviscerate him, even in a boxing match. No. Canelo would not expose Jake Paul. No one thinks that Jake Paul can fight one of the 5 greatest boxers of the generation. That's not the same thing. It doesn't expose Jake Paul. And maybe it exposes Jake Paul to like Jake Paul's fans, but no, those things aren't real. Jake Paul's just like a good athlete that's trained in boxing for years. He beat up 99% of the planet, but yeah, no, you can't fight Canelo Alvarez. That's not the same. That we're talking about miles different things. Andrew Tate would beat Jake Paul pretty handily. I would imagine. I mean, specifically boxing changes the equation just a hair. Because obviously Andrew Tate's like a real kickboxer. Like way more real than Jake Paul. But boxer could be slightly different, but I mean, Andrew Tate's real. What do you guys like for the Knicks? Let's do this. Let's skip Towns, because I think Towns is pretty clearly the answer. Bridges, Hart, Anunoby, Brunson. Who's the guy you want the most of from the Knicks today? I can't be talking about Jake Paul this much. No one wants that, including me. Tat says Hart. Valentino says Hart. Jeremy Savage wants all of them. Hart, OG. Live life, grow. That's not the way to do it. I'm not sure who you think is going to be playing in a blowout for the Knicks, but I can promise you that it's going to be largely all the guys we're talking about. Bunch of OGs and a bunch of Harts. That seems to be the consensus. What I'm really interested in, guys, is not a soul outside of Jeremy Savage cheating and picking everybody. No one picking Brunson. Is that intriguing to you guys? If the snap answer is all the other guys, does that make Brunson more interesting? Yeah, run the bases. You might be right. There's just nothing we can do right now. We'll have all that information eventually. But I would not be surprised at all if he didn't play either. And maybe McBride doesn't either. I don't know. I just find it very interesting that the best player on the Knicks was never an answer for anybody in chat. That's interesting to me. That's interesting. Because if everybody's thinking it here, if it's that many answers, I kind of feel like that's the case. And if that's the case, maybe Jalen Brunson's getting slept on a little bit. Just a hair. Just a hair. Curious. Look, maybe it won't matter. Maybe Towns will be out and McBride will be out and we're playing all these Knicks like crazy and it doesn't matter what the answer is. I like him in GPPs, that's for sure. All right, Indy and Toronto. Pacers are 4.5-point favorites in Toronto, 234.5 total. This is tied for the highest total on the slate. Indy, we don't have their injury report. I'm just going to move forward with the assumption that it's no Aaron Nesmith, no Andrew Nembhard, and everybody else is playing. And we're getting a boatload of ownership into Indy. Are they the most owned team on DraftKings right now? They are. Okay, so the Pacers currently have the most ownership. We'll see if any of that's just a little weird. Okay, it is. Unless something happened yesterday that I don't know of, the ownership that we have coming into TJ McConnell will not be there. That is not real in any way. He will not be 56% owned unless Halliburton is out. So unless I missed something for Indy, that ownership to TJ McConnell can be ignored. But lots of ownership here coming into Halliburton, 20% across both sites. We've got 20% coming into Siakam, 15 on FanDuel. We've got 30 to Benedict Mathurin, 20 on FanDuel. We got 10 for Miles Turner on both sites. Now, again, disregard the 56 that is shown on the screen for TJ McConnell. That will not be the case unless there's something really weird going on. But the minutes have been, he did play 23 yesterday, so interesting. Not that he's not a great per minute guy. You give him a bump in minutes and things look a little bit different, but 56 will be really unlikely. But all those other guys, I have Halliburton, Siakam, Mathurin, and Turner all in that 15 to 17% optimal range. Those guys should all be getting a healthy chunk of ownership. I think Mathurin's the easiest guy to get to, and that's why he's showing the most ownership. That shooting guard, small forward eligibility is huge. I understand the appeal of Halliburton, but I don't get that dude right ever. So I'll let you guys know what I'm doing with him so you could do the opposite. I get Siakam every night. I'm going to get him again today, especially if he's 20% owned. Just a really good play. And then Turner. You're never mad getting to Miles Turner, especially now when they don't have backup centers. Like, his path to huge minutes is just there. He's playing 33, 34 a night. So I really like that four-man group of Halliburton, Siakam, Mathurin, and Turner. Those guys look fantastic today. But Mathurin is the best option out of all of them. He is indeed. Now on the Toronto side, these guys are so weird, man. Jakob Poeltl's been having some wild-ass games lately. I'm going to assume that we don't have... Oh, yeah, still no Scotty Barnes, still no Quickly, still no Bruce Brown, still no Kelly Olynyk. So everything's the same here. We've got around 20 to 25% ownership on both sites coming into Jakob Poeltl. We've got around 15% ownership for RJ Barrett on DraftKings, 8,600. That price is pretty healthy, but still looks good. The price isn't all that healthy on FanDuel, though. 7,800 for RJ Barrett on the FanDuel side. He is 40% owned. Deserves every bit of that. That price tag is really appealing for him. Grady Dick is 15% owned on FanDuel, $500 cheaper than he is on DraftKings. Ochai Agbaji is 20% owned on FanDuel. Obviously a technicality based on where the salaries land, but you rarely see somebody miss an entire salary range Ochai Agbaji is 6,100 on DK and 4,900 on FanDuel. So the Toronto side of this game looks really good on the FanDuel end because of how cheap they are. Davion Mitchell is $800 cheaper on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings. So Toronto looks amazing on FanDuel. The Jakob Poeltl piece on DraftKings looks really good. I think Davion Mitchell and RJ Barrett and Grady Dick are all worth a look on DraftKings. This is a game you're going to need to have a lot of. To me, this is probably, at least so far, it's the best game we've talked about for DFS on both sides. If you're trying to be, balanced for exposure, both sides of these teams look fantastic. You're going to end up with a lot of Indy and a lot of Toronto, and I'm more than okay with that. Two teams with really bad defenses. Indy's offense is good. Toronto's offense isn't good, but they've got guys that can play. I don't know how else to say it. What's the Indy offense actually been so far this year? Indy offense is 8th. Toronto is 24th. Yeah, that makes sense. But this is a game to target. Pacers Raps. Matthew. The changes, in my experience, have been negative. But I'm going to have a conversation about that with them, actually, today. And hopefully, we could try to talk about how I think some of those changes may have negatively impacted people. Yes, that's my dog. The pest control guy just rang my doorbell for the 12th month in a row, even though we tell them every time to please don't ring the doorbell. All right, game 5. We're halfway through the FanDuel slate. We have 2 games left on the DraftKings slate. Yeah, I will, Matthew. I don't think there's going to be much of an update coming from it, but I will be able to give my thoughts. Houston Rockets, 4-point dogs in Milwaukee, 222 total. We don't have a Rockets injury report. They played yesterday. Giannis and Dame are both probable for Milwaukee. We have not seen Dame in the past 3 games, so he is out of the concussion protocol. Ryan Osborne, when are you going to talk about your app? When it's finished. When it's finished. We can talk about what I've done on the DFS side for it. Oh, that's way too big. We could talk about, looking at someone like Alperen Şengün on Houston. We could look at his rebounds distribution. We could look at his assist distribution. Yeah, slowly but surely building out the goods. Alperen Şengün, 41 DraftKings points projection. 90th percentile outcome of 55 fantasy points. Oh, you guys can't see that. 55-point fantasy projection. 90th percentile. 28 fantasy point, 10th percentile. I'm slowly but surely building out something I really, really, really like. But anyway, let's talk Houston. So lots of ownership coming in on the Houston side, which is terrifying. And it's mostly DraftKings. On the FanDuel end, everybody is single digits. single digits in ownership and single digits in optimal for me. So I don't think we're going to be paying close attention to Houston on FanDuel. Their prices are all higher. Van Vliet's higher. Brooks is higher. Green is higher. Şengün is higher. Jabari's higher. Amin Thompson's way higher. Tari Eason is way higher. Every price is too high on FanDuel. DraftKings is a different story. 20% ownership on DraftKings to Fred Van Vliet. 20 to Dylan Brooks. 20 to Amin Thompson. 10 to Jalen Green. 10 to Alperen Şengün. 10 to Jabari Smith. Now, for the most part, I agree with everything I see. I think Amin Thompson is a hair over-owned, but still looks good. I think Dylan Brooks is a hair over-owned, still looks good. I kind of have these guys all like 10% options. Look, 11% optimal to Van Vliet, 12 to Brooks, 7 to Green, 9 to Şengün, 10 to Smith, 10 to Thompson. That makes more sense to me. So like the guys that are separating, the Van Vliets, the Brooks, the Amin Thompsons, I'm like a hair less interested in them and slightly more interested in like Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün, and Jabari Smith. Tari Eason, I'm not super interested in, but still a guy you can get to. We're going to need the injury report just in case somebody ends up out, because that will really change up what Houston has. But just the way that I see it right now, I want all of those 6 guys that are getting love, but like they're all the same dude to me. They're all around 10%. So I'll have a lot of Houston, but I don't anticipate having any one guy a lot. Now, the Milwaukee side they're unowned. You can play basically 1.5 dudes. You can play Giannis on either side because he's Giannis, but he is $12K on DK and on FanDuel. Now, that's a massive price tag, especially on DraftKings for a 6-gamer. He's 10% owned. There's nobody else getting any sort of ownership. I like Dame on FanDuel. He's only $8,400. That's $800 cheaper than DraftKings, and he's not really pulling any ownership. So if I'm going to do anything for Milwaukee, it's some Giannis if I can, and Dame on FanDuel as like a pivot. But the Milwaukee side is one of the worst sides you can get to. You just can't play these dudes. It's just not possible. The problem with the easy Giannis fade is that there aren't other pay-up options. Like, you don't really have pay-ups in Chicago and Detroit. Embiid exists, but I don't think that we're all thinking about Embiid in the same way right now. You know, I guess you've got Cat for the Knicks. You don't have it on Washington, Indy, Toronto, Houston. You don't really have it for Orlando or Phoenix. Like, Devin Booker's not really the same dude. So, like, Giannis is on an island. There's no Nikola Jokic. There's no Victor Wembanyama. There's no Luka Doncic. Who am I missing? All right, let me boost this up. So this is my raw best fantasy players table. Like, this is just who the best guys are per possession. So Giannis is on the slate. Technically speaking, my number 1 guy. There's no Jokic. There's no Wemby. Embiid exists. He's not the same dude right now. Luka's not on the slate. AD is not on the slate. SGA is not on the slate. And now we're already down to Alperen Şengün, who is 13 fantasy points per 100 possessions worse than Giannis. So that's why it's hard to just like completely disregard Giannis, because his raw points or his raw fantasy points ceiling is on a completely different planet than everybody else today. And that's where it starts to get a little scarier. A little bit. All right, Orlando and Phoenix. This is the final game on the DraftKings slate. 2 more to go for FanDuel. And we got a bunch of ownership coming into Orlando. Now, Wendell Carter Jr. is doubtful for today. So keep an eye on that if he gets a late upgrade. And then for Phoenix, we don't have an injury report yet. I don't know what they're going to do. I put Nurk in. I put Grayson Allen in. Who knows for this back-to-back. So we're getting 25% ownership coming into Goga on DraftKings and unowned on FanDuel. He's $1,300 more expensive on FanDuel. Franz is 10% on DraftKings, 16 on FanDuel. He has been insane without Paolo Banchero, one of the best players in the league so far this year. I want to say that he's like 4th or 5th in the LeBron plus-minus metric. just really, really, I mean, he's already really, really good, and he's showing even more right now. Price is getting to a point, though, where it's harder to just snap click him. Jalen Suggs looks way better on FanDuel than he does on DraftKings, and the ownership shows it. Mo Wagner's like 10 to 15% owned across DraftKings and FanDuel. That's not something super exciting to me. He plays like 20 or 21 minutes a night. You need a very specific outcome. That's a fade to me. John Isaac's minutes have been creeping up. He's 25 to 30% owned on DraftKings and FanDuel. That's another one that scares me a little bit. You need every bit of those minutes to get it right. So I see Orlando more as a team I want to get away from and not necessarily soak up all the ownership that's coming in. I think Franz is the best play you can get to, and I'm okay with that. Goga's value at 5,100 is really appealing, so I understand his ownership. I'm not as interested in Isaac and Wagner and Mo Wagner, though. That feels a little high. Maybe I'm a minute or two light on Isaac, since they're creeping up, but it's still a little tricky. I gave him 20. I think like 22 or 23 is in play for sure. It's happened. But I'm not sure I want to be there if a quarter of the field is already there. I don't know. Orlando's weird. Do you guys like Orlando here against Phoenix? It's not that I don't like them, but like it's just the guys getting ownership are not necessarily the guys I want other than Goga. 9,100 for Franz. We're talking about like star level pricing now. Deserved based on everything he's been doing since Paolo went out, though. But I don't know. I'm more pessimistic on Orlando. And then for Phoenix, clearly we need to know injury status here because that can really change things up. I went 29 minutes. We have 29% ownership coming into Grayson Allen on DraftKings, 3,800 shooting guard only. I understand where the value is coming from. We need to know if he can actually play this back-to-back first and foremost. I kind of like Tyus Jones. He's playing 33 minutes a night. He's basically unowned. I think Tyus Jones is my preferred option from Phoenix. Is that I know that sounds crazy, but with no Beal and no Durant there, he's involved much more. Booker's fine. 95. He's $400 more expensive than Franz Wagner. And I think Franz is very clearly a better option than Booker is. Now, Booker's 8,700 on FanDuel. He looks a little bit better there, but no one else is getting any ownership. It's Grayson Allen, DraftKings, Booker, FanDuel, and that's kind of it. And I don't disagree with that. Now, maybe Nurk ends up out, and we can look at Iguodala or Mason Plumlee, but we're not doing that right now. So I want to get a little bit of the slept-on Tyus Jones on DraftKings, and then we're just going to try to figure out whether or not Grayson Allen or Yusuf Nurkic are playing. So that concludes the DraftKings portion of this show. The final two games, Atlanta and Sacramento, Golden State and the Clippers, both of those games are only on the FanDuel main slate. Now, before we go any further, we need to talk about just simply signing up at Stokastic. It's kind of the biggest no-brainer thing that you guys should do. If you go to the Stokastic website, go to this Stokastic dropdown and click Get DFS Sims for free. Now, this link also exists in the description of this video. Follow these. We have 4 steps that can get you a month of whichever sports sim you're looking for. That's projections, ownership, boom bust, our contest generator, our single game simulator, or our single lineup simulator, all of our regular sims package. And all it does is require you to sign up through one of our affiliates, whether that's on the Pick'em site side with Better or Sleeper or Underdog, or maybe it's the Sportsbook side with BetMGM or Caesars or Bet365. We have offers for all of them. They cost you nothing. You'll just have to make a deposit there and place whatever qualified wager you need. And you'll get bonuses when you sign up with them. But if you do that, you will get a month of our sims when you email support after following these instructions. There's no reason, like, if you're here, if you watch these shows, if you're curious what we have behind the paywall, this is a really good way for you to check it out, and it won't cost you a single cent. Totally free for a month. The Atlanta Hawks are 4.5-point underdogs in Sacramento, 234.5 total. This is the tied for the biggest total on the slate. For Atlanta, we do not have an injury report. I'm just going with what we had last time out. Vit Krejci is finally back. DeAndre Hunter sat out the front end of the back-to-back, so he's out, or he should be in here. And now that they have some more of these bodies back, it starts to become pretty difficult to get to Atlanta. We have single-digit ownership to everybody on FanDuel from the Hawks. I think Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, and Onyeka Okongwu would be guys I'd be willing to get to in a GPP. But there are no priorities for the Hawks. Terry Moses, no, you should absolutely never look at that in any context ever. At least not the way that any site that you can go to shows it. There is nothing more meaningless in basketball. The way that it's presented, at least. I don't have anything else to say here for Atlanta. Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, Okongwu are the only guys that I'm interested in. Gonna have a real hard time getting to a $7,900 Dyson Daniels. Sacramento, though? Yeah, they're a bit different. In particular, De'Aaron Fox, who's been going bananas as of late. Still no DeRozan, still no Malik Monk. Doubtful tag on Domantas Sabonis. 75% ownership is coming into De'Aaron Fox and Trey Lyles. Now, do I think those numbers come down? Yes. Do I think they're the two highest owned guys on the slate for FanDuel? Yeah, probably. They're going to be over 60 for sure. 9,500 for Fox. I mean, he's just scoring like crazy without those other guys on the floor. 4,500 for Trey Lyles. Got the start at the 5 last time out with no Sabonis. Both of those guys look incredible based on the minutes they've been playing. Trey Lyles getting well north of 30. Fox playing 37 a night. So you want to get a ton of those two. You also want to get a ton of Kevin Huerter and Keegan Murray. 35 and 40% owned for Huerter and Murray. These guys are all pulling huge optimal rates. On the FanDuel side, I have Fox and Lyles 1-2 in contenders. Keegan Murray is 5th and Kevin Huerter is 8th. 4 of the Sacramento Kings are in my top 10 plays on FanDuel, and that is completely in line with ownership and totally makes sense. They are massive priorities. Atlanta's defense is not very good. The total in this game is huge. The minutes for these guys are massive with all of their injuries right now. There are no better 4 dudes that you could look at right now from a team than Murray, Fox, Huerter, and Lyles. Fox and Lyles are in one tier. Murray and Huerter are in the next tier. But they are in the top 2 tiers. They look great. They look absolutely fantastic. One last thing I want to touch on before we finish this bad boy off. That will be the schedule for the rest of the day. At 10:15, you get the NFL Strategy Show with Laufey and Matt Gajewski. They will be breaking down Monday Night Football. NHL Strategy Show coming up at 2 p.m. I will be back with Spags for the deeper dive at 5 p.m. Greg and Eric will handle NBA Live Before Lock for you guys at 6. They'll take you up to 7. And then Laufey and Matt Gajewski are back at 7:15, breaking down everything for Monday Night Football on NFL Live Before Lock. Now, we finish this one off with you guys hitting the like button and me talking about Golden State and the Clippers. Warriors are 4-point favorites, 225 total. Steph is questionable. Kevon Looney is questionable. Lindy Waters is questionable. I thought he was going to be out for a while. It ended up being just a hyperextension. I assume he doesn't play today. I don't think it matters all that much. You're not really getting to anything from Golden State unless we get that Steph news. 9% ownership coming into Andrew Wiggins, so no one got to double digits. Wiggins, to me, is the best guy you can get to from FanDuel, but all these dudes. It's Curry, Wiggins, and Green that play like 28 to 30-something minutes. And then Kuminga, Hield, Pajemski, Kyle Anderson, Trace Jackson Davis, Kevon Looney, Gary Payton, Moses Moody. It's impossible to prioritize anything else here from Golden State. So we're going to need Steph out to change up what Golden State looks like. And then for the Clippers, they don't have an injury report, but they aren't being gotten to at all. 5% ownership to Harden, 5% ownership to Chris Dunn, 8 to Kevin Porter Jr. I once again, like I do every other day, think Ivica Zubac is getting ignored too much on FanDuel at just 2% ownership. I think Harden's probably like a pretty interesting GPP play, but I don't think you're getting to the Clippers here either. The Warriors defense is really good. This is going to be a tough spot for the Clippers to generate positive offense. So the final game of the night, the 10:30 start for Warriors and Clippers, unless we get Steph Curry out, I don't think we're going to have much of this one at all. So that kind of wraps it all up. 8 games up, 8 games down, 6-gamer on DraftKings. That's where we stand to start the day off. We're going to have a lot of changes by the time we get to the deeper dive and lock, given the fact that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of the 16 teams that play today are on a back-to-back and don't have an injury report out yet. So that information will be massive. I fully expect to see a bunch of questionable tags that we are not necessarily anticipating, and that will change up what we're seeing on the slate. But we did just take a fine lap through everything, and we got a good start on the day. We lubed up the wheels, so to speak. I don't know what that means, but that's what we did. So, guys, I'm going to dip on out of here. That is the end of the NBA Strategy Show. One last time, like, subscribe, notification bell. Nope. I punched the microphone, and I lost my pop filter. So let's put that back on there. Apologies for that. Follow me on Twitter at Josh Engleman. Lots more to talk about throughout the rest of the day. Should be a fun slate. I love 6-gamers. Sort of like my favorite slate. The lowest end of my favorite slate size. So let's have some fun tonight. Good luck, everybody. Sign up at Stokastic using the link in the description. I'll talk to you later.